What if the most important thing in your life isn't time, money, or even happiness, but meaning? Welcome back to the You Potential Podcast. I'm your host, Shaun Maslyk. Today, I'm joined by one of the world's leading experts on meaning and purpose, Dr. Michael Steger. He's a professor of psychology, the founding director of the Center of Meaning and Purpose at Colorado State University, and the creator of the Meaning in Life Questionnaire, a tool that's been used in studies around the world. In this episode, we talk about how to spend our moments wisely, the three core dimensions of meaning, and how positive psychology can rise to meet the deeper challenges of our time. As Viktor Frankl said, those who have a why to live can bear almost any how. If you've ever wondered what truly makes life worth living, this episode offers both insights and directions. Let's dive into the science and soul of meaning. Let's go. Mike, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Shaun. I appreciate it.
I'm really looking forward to this. We're just chatting before we hit record, and I was sharing with you that during my studies, I referenced quite a few of your papers. I used your meaning in life inventory. So to be able to have the opportunity to speak to you is a joy. So I really appreciate this time.
Well, thank you, Shaun. It's you never know what's going to happen when you write these papers. I mean, we kind of have to for a job, and then some of us are really just fired up about the ideas or the discovery, and so we put them out there and try to be very intrinsic about it, right? Like, it's okay. The process was worth it. Doesn't matter if anyone ever reads it, but I have to say it's really awesome when people do say that they've run across one of my papers. So I'm happy to hear that. Very happy.
Well, I mean, considering your meaning in life questionnaire is popular worldwide and one of the most widely used questionnaires, I'm sure you get it once or more than once. So your work has truly impacted many people. And I'm really looking forward to diving into meaning in life, how you think about this, and your story of how you got to where you are. But first, I thought it was really important that we started with one of the truly biggest questions around meaning.
Yeah.
How meaningful was it for you to watch the Liverpool football team win its 20th league title?
Yes, this was very good. So there's a lot of tragic backstory to my sports fandom. I'm from Minnesota, and but also I spent some of my growing up years in Buffalo, New York. So if you're fans of football, you then know that the Vikings were the first team ever to go and lose 4 Super Bowls. The second team to do that was the Buffalo Bills. They managed to do that in 4 straight years. A record I think will never be broken in coming close, but making fans suffer. So that's part of my heritage, is just like constant disappointment. I mean, we did have a couple good years with the Twins, but the Timberwolves have been a disaster. We had the Minnesota North Stars. They were stolen by a greedy person named Norm Green. Not that I care anymore. And turned into the Dallas Stars. So we've got a lot of pain in our background. We had the Minneapolis Lakers, who turned into Los Angeles Lakers and then became successful. So it's just a checkered past. And I connected with the Liverpool team in part because I think it just wormed its way into my brain. If you know Pink Floyd, and I went to a little bit of a hippie college, and there's a song, I think it's Pillow of Winds or something like that. And at the end, they're playing this weird chant that's going on, and it ends up being the Liverpool fans singing "You'll Never Walk Alone." That's the outro to that song. I think it's off of Murmur. So we'd listen to that a lot. We had no idea what they're saying. You know, they speak Scouse, we speak American, all these sorts of things. But that was just in the back of my head. And then I started playing FIFA, and, they give you like one good player, and it was Steven Gerrard, and he was so slow. I was like, how is this my good player? What a ridiculous joke. Like, who is this guy? And so then I started I noticed that the Premier League soccer came on, and the first game I started watching was Liverpool, and there was Steven Gerrard. I was like, oh, so that's the guy. That's why I'm terrible at FIFA, right? But then he hit this like amazing diagonal pass. Like, his vision of the field was something that was really cool. And there was Luis Suarez running around biting people, and Martin Skirtle headbutting people back in 2012, and it just looked like a Minnesota style team, trying to
Uh,
hang together but fighting against the odds. And so they just grew on me at that point, and I started following them ever since. And yeah, so I will also say that there's something special about that team. I mean, that culture. I have a lot to say about this, right? So it was important. I actually shared this in a talk I gave just like a week or so ago. I was watching by myself in my living room when they scored enough points for the season to lock up the title. And it was at Anfield, their home stadium. The crowd is in full voice, as they say on the British broadcasts. And there's a moment where everyone's taking it in, and then the head coach Arne Slot, it's his first year, he gets the microphone and he sings the previous coach's song, right? So not every club will sing a song for the coach, but the previous coach, Jurgen Klopp, was quite legendary. And so in his essentially victory speech, the current coach sings the name of the previous coach, right? So just as, in a sense, like that's unheard of, right? Like every coach comes in as like, it's my way now and blah, blah, blah. But he basically used the same team and then got something different out of them. And then if you go back 1 year before that, when Jurgen Klopp, that coach, went out the door, he sang his own song, but with Arne Slot's name, right? So again, the ego was gone. It was about the collective. So the outgoing coach wasn't like, yeah, your best years are behind you. He was like, no, let's really pass the torch and welcome this new coach to carry on the heritage. And then you think about the song that they sing, right? You'll never walk alone. And it just, I don't know. I think it's different. I think it's different than singing Tiny Bubbles at West Ham or something like that. So
uh, okay, I did. Wow, so much learning there. You'll never walk alone. I
you'll
mean,
never walk
geez,
alone.
what a fitting phrase for the story you just described there.
Yeah. Little glimmers of hope, right? Even in really mundane and in some ways not particularly important areas. But
I mean, I want to get into your elements of the three core dimensions of meaning in life. As you're explaining this sporting experience, I can't help but think that they all line up for why potentially we get so much joy and satisfaction out of sports teams. Maybe let's just go right into that because I'm
yeah.
a big hockey fan. My Edmonton
Yeah.
Oilers are playing the Dallas Stars right now in the conference
Go
finals.
Oilers.
Yes, go Oilers. The Stars stole, or this, yeah, the Stars stole your team.
Absolutely.
Um, actually, let's do that. Let's go into what is meaning in life and why does it matter and what
Yeah.
are the three dimensions, and then we're going to piggyback sports onto that afterwards, or
Yeah.
any collective belief.
Yeah. I can definitely use Liverpool and you can use Edmonton. So meaning in life is really the psychological journey each of us takes to try to figure out what's going on, right? So we oftentimes get this blended together with the meaning of life, right? Like the universe. Is there a God? Which God is there? What happens to do we have souls? Is there magic? Are there ghosts? Like all these sort of ways of trying to explain everything. What was there before the universe was there? Where did the universe come from? Like you can frame it in science terms, you can frame it in spiritual terms, you can frame it in religious terms, you can even frame it in individual terms. Like what did the universe choose for me? That's all big and it's really impossible as far as I've been able to figure out to get data on that. Right? I have not tracked down any huge deities or anyone who pressed a button to create the universe. So I don't know how that works. So I can't get data on it. But I can get data on something that feels very personal to me and a lot of people, which is how we ourselves try to make sense of our existence. Right? We're here. We don't really always know why. Whatever answers we have oftentimes feel like leaps of faith. And what are we supposed to do? It's hard to say because the world changes around us all the time. So for most folks, we seem to be able to absorb a sense that, yeah, life is meaningful. My life is meaningful. I'm here, aren't I? Right? That seems to be enough in a lot
Mhm.
of ways. And I want us to hold that thought in our heads because one of the things that happens when we talk about meaning too much is we cause people to question a little bit that sense, right? That sense that's hard to articulate in language, and then it feels like it's hard to defend, right? So there's a study in 2014 And all around the world, they studied, I think, 140 countries, did home surveys, phone surveys, personal surveys, like real good data collection with a admittedly not great question, but this is the data we have. Is like, does your life have meaning or purpose? Yes or no? And then they judged each country, or they charted each country by the percentage of people that said yes. And the least meaning-filled populace still was 65% yes.
Hmm.
Right? So that tells me, and also there's a lot of metrics that suggested that countries had larger percentages of people saying that life was meaningful when they had more traditional societies. They had lower gross domestic product. Like something about the growth urge in countries is dissolving what maybe was the way we just absorbed meaning from our circumstances, from our communities. So it used to be a very natural thing to have meaning and to feel it. And I think now one of the modern issues is it feels like we're on our own to rebuild it. So that's the process that I'm really fascinated by. And we can break it down into easier chunks than like how do you just concoct a sense that your life is meaningful is still pretty big and broad, even though it's not, you don't have to explain the universe, just yourself, but even that's a bit of a trick. So then we have like subcategories or maybe invitations or doorways. People can explore that a little bit.
Hmm. And I really appreciate how you articulate this difference between meaning in life and of life, meaning of life. Because I think, to your point, we can get lost in this grandiose idea of the meaning of life. And as I hear you talk, it sounds like when we focus on the meaning in life, there's more of a sense of control or agency that lies on us to kind of answer the call.
Yeah, I think there's a sense of control and agency because it's something we can do.
Hmm.
We can inhabit our lives with a sense of meaning. We can do things that are meaningful. We can make changes in other people's lives that we can see that feel meaningful. Not to say that a lot of the explanations for the meaning of life don't give us that same thing. I guess I would just say like a big difference is we can collect data on meaning in people's lives, and we can't really collect data on the meaning of life, at least not as psychologists, right? Because
Hmm.
psychology and other social sciences oftentimes are interested in how people do stuff, right? And so
Hmm.
meaning in life is something people do. I really think the meaning of life is something people have a relationship with to varying degrees of specificity or certainty, but it's not a thing that you necessarily do. Even if you have a strong sense of the universe is one way, or there is one creed or one set of beliefs I attach myself to with certainty, you still have to do it, right? So
Hmm.
that's where the meaning in life comes in as a more tangible and more personal way to, even if you have one, express the meaning of life as it seems to you in the life that you live. So it just feels more human scale, I guess.
Right. And so you talk about it on a personal level, we do meaning in life. Like it sounds like
Yeah.
it's action orientated. For yourself, how has this, I guess, lens of meaning in life is action orientated, something we do? How has that impacted you, whether it's personally or professionally?
Guess it's turned into my career, right? Like this has been something that's been on my mind since I was a little kid. I mentioned growing up in a couple places with that exemplify sports futility, at least in American football. But when we lived in Buffalo, New York, it was a more diverse place, right? It's a little bit of a gritty city. There's just a little bit more. I think there's just like a little bit more change and a little bit more chaos and a lot more diversity, I guess, right? And then we moved to rural Minnesota, farming community is just much more of the same, right? And so it struck me that one thing that I was very curious about as a kid was like how did everyone get on the same page here, right? Like how did everyone from it wasn't like everyone was Lutheran or everyone was Catholic or everyone was evangelical or something like that. They were different religions. Um, I mean, mostly within the Christian side of things, to be honest, but still, they had different beliefs, at least about the Pope, right? So, and whether you can drink wine during religious services. But so there were differences, but still, like the way that life was supposed to happen, the people who were good people, the people we were supposed to be suspicious of, the people we were supposed to push away, the people we were supposed to welcome in, all that stuff, everyone seemed to be on the same page with. And I could not wrap my head around how they figured that out, right? Because they hadn't been They hadn't talked to every human. They hadn't read every book. They hadn't gone to every religious ceremony. They hadn't, experienced everything there is that people have experienced, but yet they didn't seem to need to. They were happy enough with with the consensus they built. So that seemed to me fascinating. I bristled at that a little bit because it didn't always include me. But that process of both individually and collectively, how do we decide on a set of rules, a view of the world, a direction in life, and a positioning of ourselves within all of that? How do we decide that? That was just super fascinating for me. And that's really what stuck with me is that, that I wanted to know that. I wanted to understand that, like, am I the only weirdo who thinks about this sort of stuff, or is this a universal human thing? And yeah, so I guess my own path to thinking about meaning is an expression of the fact that I've always been attracted to trying to figure out, like, what is it we're doing here, us people, and
Yeah.
why aren't we better at it by now, right? I mean, like, come on, we've had a lot of practice.
So I guess what are we, like you said, what's happening and why aren't we better at it? Or maybe we are. What
Yeah.
did you discover?
Well, one thing I discovered is that generally speaking, people prefer not to think too hard about this question.
Mm.
People like, at least in the West, and you can think of America and Canada as exemplifying this sort of individualistic bent of things. Certainty is feels more comfortable than the ability to explain things, right, or
Mm-hmm.
understand them. So, the very first hypothesis I had as a graduate student when I was building the Meaning of Life questionnaire was I thought that people who were searching for meaning in life would be super cool. I thought they'd be happy, interesting, awesome, people you'd want to have a beer with. And it turned out, at least in the first several samples I assessed, they looked pretty anxious and not so happy. But the people who said their lives did have a meaning, especially those who didn't think too hard about it, looked very happy. And we see this kind of certainty rise in other ways of thinking about this, some of which I believe we generally accept as being beautiful and wonderful, and some of which I think we see as perhaps even being damaging. So, for instance, we see people who don't search for meaning, but feel like they have a strong sense of meaning. That is to say, they've got their answer and they're sticking with it.
Mm-hmm.
They tend to be much more religious, right? They're more engaged in religion. They're more confirmed in their religious views, but they're also more dogmatic. They've got their opinions and they don't like them challenged in almost any category, right? At least they can trend that direction. And they're more sympathetic to right-wing authoritarianism, right? This idea that there can be a powerful person who tells me the way things are. I get in line with that, and that gives me a sense of peace and direction. Now, taken in isolation, there's nothing wrong with being certain, right? And there's nothing wrong with holding to your convictions. In fact, a lot of the foundation of positive psychology is clarifying your values and doing things that are consistent with them. But if part of that journey is needing those values or needing those beliefs to be seen as correct in a confusing, diverse, and chaotic world, or not wanting them challenged, or feeling threatened, feeling personally threatened when our beliefs or perspectives are challenged, I think that can create a lot of conflict because there's another whole group of people out there, maybe people like me, who I want to hear everything. I want to hear from
Mm-hmm.
everybody. I want to understand every perspective. And then I take that in and I mess with it and see what I can come up with. So someone like me isn't a great interrogator of someone who's like, why are you asking so many questions? This is how it is, right? So I think even at this level of meaning, one of the reasons we're maybe not so great at living is that we have really different ideas about what that looks like.
Yeah, and so there's different view on what it looks like. It seems like is what can cause these disagreements or these judgments or these um yeah, people being rigid that, hey, you're challenging my view. Who are you to be doing that?
Yeah.
As you say, you're a master interrogator. How how have you experienced people's rigidity or their inability to recognize that there's maybe other ways of viewing, whether it's our values or strengths or meaning?
I mean, I think we exist on a continuum, right? There's definitely certain things. I think humor is kind of a great example of this, right? Like what you think is funny can reveal a lot about the way that you approach the world. So
Yeah.
I like sophisticated humor. I don't really like puns, but I like a lot of different kinds of humor. I can laugh at, if I'm concentrating, I can laugh at Shakespeare's jokes because I have to see them first. Like they kind of, I don't always understand what's happening in Shakespeare, but if I concentrate, I can see the humor. But I also like crude humor, right? I like things I know I probably shouldn't, right? I like Archer. I like It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Like I like Workaholics. I mean, I like things that are just that cross a lot of lines, but then there's certain lines that once it's crossed, not only is it not funny, but I find myself really having a visceral reaction of animosity towards people, right? And I consider myself to be someone who's very open-minded, but there are definitely lines to cross for me, and I can't find it. I not only can't find it funny, but I can't get back on track to find anything else funny for a little while, right? So
Hmm.
if I consider myself someone who likes a diversity of ideas, I want to be exposed to everything, the 10,000 faces of God, like gender on a continuum is totally fine by me. Maybe there's nothing out there in the universe. I'm fine with that too. We're going to die. We don't know when. I'm okay with that. Like I can be okay with a lot of complexity and uncertainty. But I have to have a lot of empathy because if I only focus on the fact that I can, or my perception, at least, that I'm open to a million different possibilities, and I don't embrace the maybe similarly universal experience of just a line being crossed and like the portcullis comes down, I'm shooting arrows over the wall, right? Like that kind of experience. If I can't also connect to that in myself, I won't understand someone who has a different set of trip switches, right? That get that same reaction. I have the same reaction, whether I think I'm really open-minded or not. So it's like a really human thing. And so that to me is really more what it's like than there's an open-minded type and then there's a closed-minded type, or there's people with beliefs and there's people who are too chicken shit to hold on to their beliefs, right? Like it's not really
Yeah.
like that. We have our lines, all of us, and if we don't have empathy for what that feels like when someone crosses our line, that's what's happening to somebody else, then it's easy to characterize them as just not the same kind of person, or maybe not even the
Hmm.
right kind of person. So that's kind of how I come to view it. In which case, then there ought to be some way to find common ground with everyone.
What a statement there. Finding common ground with everybody.
We used to do it when we had small communities.
Yeah.
Whether we could do it as a global community seems
Yeah.
like so far not so good, but who knows?
Well, you mentioned a bit earlier how your personal story where you grew up rural for a bit, and it seemed like there was this unspoken set of rules that people kind of were abiding by in the smaller communities, like you just alluded to there. As preparing for today, I found out that you were a proponent of Viktor Frankl, like many of us. And I pulled out a quote of his that seems like perhaps that's what you're alluding to with that small rural community, that there wasn't a spoken set of like, let's go find meaning this way or coherence or significance this way, but they were collectively, unspokenly trying to, or, or had a similar belief, whether it was spoken or not. But the quote was on this topic, so finding meaning, he said, we shouldn't ask what the meaning of life is, but recognize that it's life asking us the question. And so perhaps in these smaller communities or these less complex ways of living, are we just answering that question as opposed to trying to go out and find what meaning of life is?
I think it's tricky. Again, because there's different types of people, right? There's people
Right.
who want to find meaning by reading Viktor Frankl and who
Mm-hmm.
want to find meaning by even reading tough philosophers, right? Like Kierkegaard, but whomever you look to help define what the world is like and the problems we ought to be wrestling with as people. And then people prefer not to have a verbal intellectual approach to this topic. And I actually kind of feel like this will lead us into the three dimensions of meaning that seem to be out there a little bit. Um, but when we take a look at what Frankl is talking about and a lot of the types of lessons that he teaches, the messages he wants to get to us, one of the things that he's constantly sort of reminding us of is that we still have to do in life. Like a lot of our meaning comes from behaving. A lot of our meaning comes from actions. A lot of our meaning comes from immersion. So one of the things that Frankel will say, and a lot of folks have said this, is you can't really you can't chase meaning. You can't desperately cling after it or grab after it. Same thing with happiness. You can't uh, scrabble after happiness. You can't force it. So it's really about immersion in real life and immersion in the world around us. And I think when we were in smaller communities, which honestly, most of civilization, we've been in those types of communities. I don't even think the question of meaning was very pressing, right? It was just this is how life is. You've got your spot. You know, most of us would see the same faces almost every day and do mostly the same sort of stuff. Like there were wealthy people who had like lives of interesting variety. You know, like if you read the menu for a typical medieval feast in England, it's like 100 different dishes, you know, like all sorts of strange things. But most people were eating like porridge and gruel most of the days and trying to see if they could find any kind of protein, right? So it wasn't like there's variety all the time. And Laura King and her graduate students who are now professors also like to do this research, right? That consistency in and of itself creates a sense of meaning. The passage of the seasons in climates where there are multiple changes in season, or the coming of the rains, religious festivals, the fact that the sun rises, that you go to work, you know, like all these sorts of things provide consistency to our lives. And that helps us root ourselves. So we can think of like that as being one of the three dimensions, coherence, right? The ability to make sense of life. And some of us want to try to make sense of life by thinking and overthinking and rethinking and learning more and stretching and coming back and reconsolidating and having conversations and all that sort of stuff. That's kind of the poster child for this thinking your way into meaning approach. But that need can be served without having to overthink things also, right? If you grew up in a small community where religion was a really big deal, where social gatherings were a big deal, pancake breakfasts were a big deal when I grew up, right? You know, like you just absorbed a lot of consistency, predictability. You kind of had a sense of what people were like. You didn't have to figure out a million different viewpoints and languages and accents and all these sorts of things. It was just this is how life is, and that can serve that can serve a big heavy lift for us, right? And that actually kind of explains a little bit of um, the gut feeling. I think the gut feeling of meaning comes from this sense that we call significance. So if the first dimension is coherence, and we want to have a sense of who we are, what the world is like, some kind of model in our head, right? It doesn't have to be
Hmm.
incredibly highly articulated, right? It just has to work. So we can learn that on the fly, and that makes us feel good. But when we actually have the experience then of being in a place where we have our spot, right? We know our role, we know our function, we know we matter, we know people care, and we know that this whole thing that has some sort of value, like even during hard times, like that we call significance or mattering. And so yeah, we're in it, right? There's a reason to live. There's a reason to get up the next day. There's a reason to feel like my journey with all of its struggles, but all of its glories is worth living, and that my own life has inherent value. So significance, I feel like, is probably one of those early to develop things if our childhood's going pretty well, right? Like yeah, people are happy I'm in the world. Somebody is, right?
Hmm.
If we don't have that sense, that's a tough road to walk, right? So I think that that's one of the things that the world can strip away a little bit now, that we don't feel so important. We feel lost in the great tides of history compared to a billionaire. I'm trying to remember what the most recent figures were, but something like they were looking at how much money the world's 10 richest people had made in just like the last year, and then dividing that by the average salary of an American. And I think they came up with like the middle class would have to work for 760 years
Oh,
in order to make as much as the 10 richest people in the US. The figures might be off, but like you see figures
yeah.
like this all the time that are just shocking, right? Like Elon Musk making his net worth growing by $200 billion, and then you divide that by like what it's like just to try to work a job. It makes you feel pretty unimportant, right? So
Yeah.
that's now AI is coming for our very humanity. I think,
You
yeah, just as a sidebar, folks who are really interested, like I like to use AI. I think it makes very funny looking pictures. Um, but like imagine if you're the person who used to make those pictures, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're the person who used to make poems, if you're the person who used to do PR or branding or help people figure out who they are in life, and now they're just going on ChatGPT and getting kind of like homogenized generic stuff, like it takes away that spark of I'm special because of who I am.
I mean, your comment there almost strips away all three of these dimensions, and you know you'll get to the third one, but the 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 person doing the poem just really resonated with me is because at one point they were feeling significant. Their work mattered, you know. They had a coherence because, you know, they were probably in a structure, they had an identity and much of what you described. And then they had this purpose that you'll get to, but then it's gone. And I was having this conversation actually this morning, preparing today on a run with someone. And I brought up that I heard that we're going to have the first billionaires soon, solo billionaires using AI, like business, sorry, a
Mm-hmm.
business that could be $1 billion valuation, solo, like a solo owned company with no employees
Yeah,
because of AI. And it made me think, I don't know if this is some defensiveness or rigidity inside of myself, but it made me think that's terrible. Um, and I think though, like the like when I say terrible, it's like the benchmark is $1 billion. Like here's now, you should be making $1 billion. And there's this, you know, we want achievement. That's part of like the PERMA model of well-being is achievement. But without that sense of significance, I think, you know, it could be a dangerous place. So
yeah.
your comments around significance and AI made me think of that we can have a lot of achievement, but if we don't have that ingredient significance, what's it for?
Yeah, yeah, I think so. I mean, it's worrisome to think about, some trading algorithm, some AI-driven trading algorithm being its own entity and calling the shots. Like look at how people talk about the influence of BlackRock or of Vanguard, right,
Mm-hmm.
in shaping things, how there's only five banks that own everything, blah, blah, blah. Like all those, if you go down TikTok rabbit holes, you see how money gets into a lot of different corridors. Now imagine that money is not being run by a kind of understandable greedy human, but like instead by an optimizing algorithm. Like what do we do then? Like how do we even understand what's happening in the tides of the shifting, you know, I don't know that the influence is so vast when it comes to money in this world. And I'll say that, like in economics, like we sort of, I think, if I remember correctly, we view money as a universal reinforcer of a sort, right? Like we don't have to guess what a person's preferences, values, likes, dislikes are. We give them money and then they use that money to act out those likes, preferences, and values. So, but I think now it's not a universal reinforcer in those terms. It is now the scorecard. And
Mm-hmm.
that's now people don't use the money to figure out how to get things in life that they want. They use the money to figure out if they have the life they want, right? The more money they have, the better their life must be because that's what can.
Then what happens?
Well, then we get kind of horrible people, I think, right? Like people who are playing the game to increase the value, right? I think about this, like I know that you've got a finance background, but I think of like the function of luxury, the function of just super yachts. We just pick
Mm-hmm.
one consumer category. It seems to me the only function of super yachts is to provide an entertaining competitive space for the ultra wealthy who have no idea what to do with their money, right? So the bigger the yacht, if you have a submarine in your yacht, if you have a helicopter, if you have a yacht inside your other yacht, like that is keeping a different kind of score. Like it's a playing field that a normal human can't even understand anymore. But it's also an empty, morally bankrupt
Mm-hmm.
place to be. Like why does why does Larry Ellison care what happens to shape his business or whatever business he's putting in his son's name now, right? Like, well, how does he have a stake anymore? He's got everything. He's got an island. He's got everything. Like, why does he care if he's more influential than Elon Musk or if he's still pissed off at, Bill Gates or whatever? Like all these metrics that people are using, it becomes its own the scoreboard becomes the only reason to play. And I think then we see decisions that don't build a better world for really anybody.
Where do you think this motivation comes from? Or I don't know if it's motivation. Where do you think this desire comes from? I know you said a reasonable, greedy human earlier, and I thought that was a clever way of saying humans with money. But is it a lack of significance when we look at the research you've done? How? I mean, what do you think? What's happening? Why do we need to buy these luxury yachts? Because I agree, like they're too big. They're too big. They're like it's a scorecard. So
Yeah.
what do you suppose is happening here?
Well, I think that we need to crack open. Let's crack open that third box. So we've got
Yes.
coherence, right? We understand. We could use that as saying we understand the rules of the game, right? Like you mentioned, achievement from the PERMA acronym. Like achievement, if we do that, in a sense, it's because we are able to succeed in this world, right? Achievement happens when we have something that the world values, I suppose, right? Or we know how to aim what we have towards something the world values, so we get a sense of achievement. That is a coherence function, right? Because it says, like, I've understood myself well enough, or I've aimed myself well enough, or I trained or modified myself, or found a team, or whatever it is to win something, to achieve something of importance. So I understand it. I've got the playing field figured out now, right? Um, so that coherence, imagine what it feels like if not only have you figured out how to play the game well enough to have a bank account you never have to worry about, but also you play the game well enough that you get to decide now, whether your satellites are going to support Ukraine or Russia. You get to decide now whether, we're going to invest in a climate where everyone can live in, or you're going to invest in giant bunkers that'll be there when the climate is too rough to survive in. You get to decide what planet we're going to live on, Earth or Mars, right? Like imagine like you get to expand the rules of the game, not just to the achievements that more ordinary people shoot for, a house, the ability to someday retire, being able to afford to go to the doctor if something's wrong with you, like, but also like what's going to happen on the planetary scale. So that creates also a sense of significance. You can imagine
Mm-hmm.
you are literally more important than other people, right? If people are going to rewrite laws and tax code just for you. So again, like money and influence and power, they can feed these needs for meaning. They can feed the need for psychological well-being, at least on a surface level. And then purpose is the last one we didn't talk about, right? This self-organizing set of motivations and really high order goals, maybe even a sense of mission that we want to dedicate our efforts towards. Right? We tend to in polite company, we tend to glorify the people who've made the world a better place through the perseverance, commitment to their purpose. Martin Luther King Jr., Nelson Mandela, Gandhi, folks like that, right? They've done something great in the world. But in terms of practicalities, who are we really glorifying? Like the people who set their purpose to becoming incredibly wealthy and incredibly dominant, or the people who set their purpose to be incredibly uh, trying to make everyone's stakes better. Like we nod to the people who are trying to make the world better, and we hand over the keys of the kingdom to the people who are just trying to acquire as much power and influence as they can. Right. So if you want to have a sense of purpose, like I don't think most of these, I mean, you could argue that the kids of these incredibly wealthy people are wealthy by accident. But I think the people who made their wealth, they're not lacking purpose. They just have a purpose that's not particularly great from a collective standpoint. And that's one thing I'll say also attracts me to meaning as a topic, right? Because meaning includes purpose, it includes coherence, it includes significance, and it's not always so rosy, right? I think the people who had the most negative and the most positive influence on the planet have been those with, we can imagine someone who's
Mm-hmm.
just committed to doing whatever it takes to make something happen. If what they want to have happen is bad for us, and they succeed, which is more likely because they have purpose than if they don't have purpose, then that's bad for all of us. If it's good for all of us, then it's when they succeed, that's amazing. But I think meaning can have like these two sides to it. We're making meaning, but it doesn't mean we're making positive meaning.
So how we talk about making meaning, whether positive or a negative meaning, what what impacts have you seen from the people that you study who may be making more positive meaning versus a very much, I would say, individual sense of meaning that's them focused, that I think can result in negatively impacting thousands, if not millions of people. So what have you noticed are the outcomes of these two different groups?
Yeah, well, I have to say that the number of people in aggregate who have like positive meanings far exceeds those who have negative meanings. Right? Just if you take a look at the data, um, so let's just imagine someone has negative significance. Like they think that they're an abomination, right? They think that they're a mistake. They think that they're horrible, some a monstrosity, right? Like there are people who've been told that enough that they start to internalize it. Well, that would look like someone who's pretty sad, pretty depressed, pretty hopeless. But overall, when we assess coherence or meaning in life, we see people who are the opposite. So that just means in the data that when most people are finding meaning, they're finding like a good kind of meaning, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
you can see this in data as well. They tend to volunteer more, they're more generous, they engage in more acts of kindness, they aim for self-transcendence instead of self-glorification. Like so the typical path to meaning is really, really good and it delivers a kind of amazing outcomes, right? So I'm going to guess maybe 20 good, well-run longitudinal studies now showing that there's a longevity benefit to meaning. Right? If you stack that up against anything else we study in the field of well-being sciences, that is maybe, I don't know, that's double the research endeavor just in longevity that we see for other sorts of variables. And there's some
And
that there's not even that at all.
did it differentiate between, like we were kind of talking about, we can have a positive meaning or negative meaning? No,
No, it
just
didn't.
meaning in general.
Yeah. And so when people try to estimate this, you'll see sometimes like a 50% lower risk of dying over a 5 year span for older adults. Or you'll see people estimate that it's a 7 year lifespan advantage or a 14-year lifespan advantage. But one way or the other, we see that people have a sense of meaning and purpose. They live longer, right? And then if we backtrack, if we try to reverse engineer, what are they doing differently? Well, I mean, they're caring more, they're happier, they're less at risk for mental illness and psychological disorders. They're more oriented towards their communities and things like that that we think of as being good, right? So not negative meanings, not negative purposes. They're not trying to destroy an entire type of person, right? Um, but we also see that, like you said, you're chatting with a friend while you're running, right? I think I heard that.
Yeah, yeah.
That's two amazing things that people with a sense of meaning and purpose tend to do. They do tend to engage in more proactive health behaviors, right? They watch what they eat. Um, they're more likely to have a plant-based diet than a meat-based diet. So that's just the data, people. It turns out that's better for the planet and for communities also, but it's,
How,
it's
how
a
about the
knock-on effect.
researcher who researches this? Do you have a plant-based or a meat diet?
I have a mostly plant-based diet, except for when
Okay, yeah.
I travel, and it's not because I don't love meat.
Yeah.
I love the taste of meat, but I just think it's unsustainable, and it's just too selfish for me to eat meat that then damages quality of life for other
Hmm.
people. But that's everyone's decision to make. But it leads to health effects. You see people following doctors' orders more if they have a sense of meaning instead of saying, I can keep smoking, or
Yeah.
I don't need to exercise. I'll start exercising when I'm 80 when I really need to. Like you see people investing over the long term in their health, in their mental health, and in their relationships and in their communities because their life matters in their
Hmm.
even in their own perspective. So I think it doesn't even feel like magic then that meaning and purpose lead to living longer because meaning and purpose leads to living a different life that's more healthy.
Yeah, I mean, you're one of the best researchers on this, and I mean, you're in the U.S., I'm in Canada here, but I could feel your energy coming through this screen here, and you just feel vibrant, and so I bet you're going to be in those statistics increasing longevity. But
We'll see.
I, there's my scientific explanation for why you're going to be living longer. But don't
I
rely
do
on
have
that.
a big strike against me though. I'm six
Oh,
six,
oh,
and
yeah.
tall people don't live as long, so I
Yeah. Well,
need
maybe
it.
you're counteracting it with your meaning.
That's
Uh,
right. That's right.
um, you mentioned here, so we talked about those three core dimensions that I kept derailing us, but we got to them: significance,
Yeah.
coherence, and purpose. And as I hear you speak, it really seems to me that there's this overarching lens of, you used the word transcendence. And again, I believe Frankl talked a lot about transcendence. And
Yeah.
that's when we stop focusing on ourselves for the, and looking for others. You recently um, published a paper called A Shift Towards Regenerative Positive Psychology, where I believe the focus was moving beyond just individual well-being towards a more, I guess, global or collective view of well-being.
Yeah.
How, if at all, has that influenced the way you've been thinking about meaning in life?
I'd say the reverse happened. The more I thought about meaning, and in particular in comparison to areas like well-being science, positive psychology, positive education, all these sorts of positive organizational scholarship, discontent kept growing, right? So I think this would be an interesting sort of thing to like go back in time, 1998, have just a standard economist predict what positive psychology would look like in
Mm-hmm.
2025. And I think that that economist would predict 100% what this field of well-being and positive psychology has turned into, because it's really played a market-oriented game, right? It's played into market demands. The market wants to know quick, like, if you want to become famous and have a great book, you have to write one that gives people kind of easy solutions to things, right? Oftentimes short-term fixes that are in their control and that they can get a quick boost out of, right? So there's a quick
Mm-hmm.
reinforcement. It's going to focus on individuals because that's who's going to come to the conferences. That's going to who's going to buy the books. That's going to be the people who are going to buy up your app or whatever you've got on the market. It's going to be a place where there's actually, I think we see like a luxury, a bifurcation of consumer goods in well-being sciences. You've got the luxury offerings by the famous people from the elite institutions. And then you've got the sort of more commoner thing, like like from lesser known institutions and less big names, and people will pay more to hear the same exact thing from someone they know other people paid a lot to hear those things
Mm-hmm.
from, right? And they won't pay too much for the folks who maybe created the research and the insights that the famous person is just passing along. So I think we see these issues where really positive psychology or well-being sciences has become in the popular market just a business as usual, right? It plays for it plays it plays for some short-term horizons. It plays for individualism. It plays into individual choice. It kind of creates its own demand, right? Like, oh, have you heard about? I just remember like when I first went to my first positive psychology conference in maybe 2001, 2002, everyone was talking about hope. It was like
Mm-hmm.
Rick Snyder and Shane Lopez's, particularly Rick Snyder's work though, around hope. And like, it was almost like have you heard the good news about hope? Right? Like it was like there's an evangelical quality to it. So it's like, oh, I haven't. I mean, I think it's good, but I better learn more about this hope stuff, right? And then it was character strengths, and then it was gratitude, and then it was grit, and then it was mindfulness, and then it was like blah 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 blah. Whatever we're on to now, I don't really awe. I think we're on awe now,
Ah,
right? And we
yeah.
did self-compassion a little while back, and so what is that really saying? Like, do you really need, does every single person, and maybe meaning's the next one, and I'm going to be the next irritating person who's like, yeah, but have you heard the good news about meaning and purpose? But do we really need, like, do I need to question whether I have enough hope? And then I have to question whether I know my character strengths enough. And then I need to question whether have enough, a robust enough gratitude practice. And then I have to question blah, blah, blah. The store, going back to the
Yeah.
bookshelves, going back to the online courses, or coming to hear people like me talk about my area and why my area is the one you need to pay attention to now, right? So I think we bought into a consumer. It was really an American endeavor. The positive psychology, the thing that kicked off the big wave of happiness and
Mm-hmm.
well-being science, which has been robust and global, has, at least in its most visible aspects, certainly not. The field itself is not like this, but the visible aspects of it are very much like
Mm.
any other.
Hmm.
So I think that that's the discontent I started to feel. It's like, well, why is the world so terrible if all of a sudden we have a brand new galvanized science of making life better? Like what we're really essentially saying, our implicit social contract with the world is like, let us study something that sounds so ridiculous as happiness. And we promise you that will make better people who are living better lives, who will then make the world better. And then more people will be able to be happy and they'll do better things and they'll make the world better. And eventually, in a short period of time, 1 or 2 generations, we'll have a better world. So I was just curious. I didn't feel like the world was better. I didn't feel like we were tackling the big threats I saw, um, conflict, displacement, starvation, wealth inequalities, climate change, like big
Poverty.
problems that we need to just figure out and probably sacrifice in the short term for. I see very little emphasis on sacrificing my interests now, what my body wants, what my mind wants, my cravings. I see very little emphasis on sacrificing that now for something better for other people later, which is the only way we're going to get out of all these problems we've created with this short-term emphasis. So I went into the data. I was like, is the world better? From 1998 or thereabouts, when
Hmm.
Martin Seligman announced that he wanted to create a formal movement for positive psychology, till today. And you can see some signs of hope. It seems like globally depression and suicide rates went down. Anxiety went up though. Life satisfaction on a country by country basis didn't change too much, but happiness went up. So that's some signs of hope. Gender equality around the world is better. Child mortality around the world is better. But other things aren't so good, right? We see democracy dying or under threat around the world. We see more people dying of air pollution now. And of course, we see horrible things happening with wealth inequalities, particularly in the wealthier countries. Globally, the middle class grew, but in developed countries, the middle class has been giving up ground to the top class. And we see really no signs of hope. It's not like, well, we have two choices ahead of us then, right? Like this, I'm an existentialist. I'm into seeing the grim future. It's like we're either going to live in the Matrix or we're going to live in Mad Max Fury Road, right? We're either going to be like meat servants for some algorithm robot thing out there somewhere, or we're going to be killing each other for water, right? And why? Why does it feel like we're just veering towards one or possibly both of those worlds? And why aren't we talking about it in a community that's both science grounded and kind of like action oriented, right? People get a master's in applied positive psychology or other applied well-being sciences. They get one because they want to make a difference. So why aren't we giving them a science? Why aren't we giving a set of practices and orientations that lets those people feel like it's totally cool to try to make a difference at a collective level instead of,
Hmm.
you know, I don't know if that captures it really well, but that was the thing. Like meaning is supposed to be transcendent. And once I saw certain types of voices co-opting the meaning and purpose language, I felt like we were running out of time to get a self-transcendent message out there because we don't have a self-transcendent science. So that was the real call.
Wow, this is powerful. Wh- That's the call you want to make. And how was the call received?
Well, it's hard to tell, right? The people who know me
Hmm.
and heard me complaining, like in 2019, was it 2019? Yeah, I think in 2019 I was part of a talk, Cave Positive Psychology, which was one of the first sort of phrases to try to capture this idea we need to start thinking systems level. There's also systems
Hmm.
informed positive psychology. Like both those ideas were coming out around 2018, 2019. And I was a part of this talk and had like Tim Lomas, who was really well
Hmm.
associated with third wave. In this version of third wave, there's turns out there's lots of different kind of waves and different people launching waves and they look different. But also Ryan Nemec, right, who's well associated with character strengths, talking about this expansion beyond the individual to something bigger. But my talk was called Were the Violins Playing a Merry Tune While the Titanic Sank? Positive Psychology in a Frightened Dying World. Right?
Hmm.
So I'm like, that's fun to say, but if you're not going to back that up with something that's actually hopeful and action oriented, you're not helping. You're not creating meaning. You're not creating hope. So it was the folks who heard me give those talks were like, you should push this a little bit further than just taking pot shots. And so they were happy. I finally made the paper. It's been viewed quite a lot.
Yeah.
I got an agreement with my department here, and then uh, they would pay half of the cost to make it open source. And then I run a Center for Meaning and Purpose here at CSU, and the director, who is me, agreed to pay the other half of the costs for this paper. So anyone can access it. We don't want to firewall knowledge if what we're trying to
Mm.
build is a collective sense of capability
Yeah.
to tackle the world's issues. So it's been read quite a lot, or at least viewed, but it's not been cited that much. So who knows? But I have a chance to talk about the topic at 8:30 in the morning on the last day of the IPA, the International Positive Psychology
Oh,
Association's
okay.
World Congress in Brisbane in July 2025. So we'll see if people wake up for it, after the big party night. So that'll be a test. I'll count the number of people, Sean. I'll let you know
Okay.
who
Yeah.
stumbled their way into the auditorium for that talk.
Well, we'll definitely put the open source paper in the show notes. But it takes people like yourselves to challenge this notion to um, question, is this working? Especially, I get the sense that you want this to make a difference. You believe in this research. I can't help but think about what role does the accumulation of wealth, money, what role, if any at all, has it played in keeping it at that individual realm, the study of positive psychology or meaning or hope, like you've described? And what role has that played in it trying to allow, like you talked about, economics come into it?
Well, I mean, I think it plays a really different role for different people.
Mm-hmm.
I think I don't understand. I can't really understand why someone with $30 million dollars or more in the bank cares at all about tax policy, right? There's like, what on earth kind of tax policy would reduce their quality of life at all? But then I'll talk about a dynamic that I see that all of us feel that I think weasels its way into the folks who don't feel rich enough. I don't know what feels rich enough for folks. $30
Mm-hmm.
million dollars, I can't imagine how I would spend that without just giving it away. But I know that people with $30 million dollars are like, can't do anything, right? So it's like this crazy thing. But like, to see billionaires lining up to get tax breaks, to get laws changed, I don't get it. I don't understand what they're really shooting for. So I can't answer that. Like the ultra
Mm-hmm.
wealthy, why can't they let well enough alone and kind of and share the spoils a little bit? There's something different going on there for that type of person. I don't think they really think about regular people
Mm-hmm.
or
Mm-hmm.
have any clue.
It's at a level where it's paper money, or it's play money. Like
Yeah, yeah.
there's
Yeah, it's
no
just
pain of pain anymore when your
just the
bank
numbers
account is that
there.
large.
And
Yeah.
I don't think you probably know that many people who are normal at that point. Like, people who do stuff for you. And
Yeah.
people, you just say you want something done and it's done. And then if it's not done, you're like, wait, do I have to actually talk to someone to
Yeah.
make this happen? That's not what I budgeted for. But so I can't understand the psychology there. But on a smaller level, I think what the society is really good at, and what having money helps us keep track of, is the sense that we're always falling behind, or that something's looming on the horizon that we haven't quite planned for yet. So we have this sense both that things are being taken away from us, and that in the future, even more stuff will be taken away, right? So we have this like hoarding sense
Mm.
coupled with a sense of futility, right? Like, all we can do is stack money because we don't know what they're going to do next, whoever they is, right? We don't know what's going to happen next. So that's all we can do. We just know we don't know how much we're going to need to retire. We don't know how much we're going to need to buy a house. We don't know how much college is going to cost. I do because I've got two kids in American outstate universities right now, but like, we don't know what's coming next, but we do know that everyone tells us it's easier with money, right? And so we track that. We feel like it's what's going to protect us if we lose Social Security or other social benefit programs. It's what's going to protect us if we have insurance that suddenly sticks us with a crazy bill for some routine life preserving care. It's what's going to protect us if our neighbors get crazy, right? We can build a compound. We can protect ourselves. Like there's this idea that we're under
Hmm.
siege, that things are slipping away. And I think that that's probably pretty intentionally um, fostered, right? Like there's an image of a world out there that we're supposed to be participating in. We're supposed to be driving our cars through beautiful forests and then amazing empty urban streets and then going to fancy restaurants that always have a table for us and then flying off to watch the Eiffel Tower glitter at sunset, right? And that's the life we're supposed to have. At the same time, we're hearing news about everyone losing their house. Gen Z will never be able to afford a house in the United States or Vancouver or Toronto or anywhere else, right? And so it's like, okay, this is the life that's normal in every car ad, every beer ad, right? That's the life that's normal. But then what feels normal, what feels more typical is falling further and further behind. So I think it creates the sense that we have to
Hmm.
accumulate, and there's never going to be enough of a buffer because who knows?
And I feel like that sense could play and challenge our feeling of significance and coherence if we're looking at everybody is, like you said, you didn't say social media, but my mind went there, is like they're flying around to see the Eiffel Tower at sunset or these gourmet dinners. And if we feel that we can't do those things, I would have to think that it challenges and diminishes our sense of significance and coherence, meaning like I don't fit into that. What's wrong with me?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we're being undermined by a collective dynamic, right? We're being undermined by images that everyone shares and a lot of people buy into that say this is what the good life is supposed to look like, and this is what you're going to need in order to get that done. Uh, what we, what almost everyone I know in well-being science says is don't buy into that shit. They say like, don't buy into that. It's not good for people. There's no research. Well, there's very few studies on materialism that show it's not good. There's very few studies that show it's not bad for us. Like there's very
Yeah.
few studies on materialism that show it's not bad for us. There's very few studies on greed that show it's not bad for us. There's very few studies on extrinsic motivation or doing things just for the material rewards of it that don't say that's also very bad for us. So we know
Hmm.
this, but we can't seem to ourselves. Like I'm someone who probably from the minute my kids were born was like, how am I going to pay for college? Right? Okay, now I've done that or almost. How am I going to ever retire? How am I going to survive any kind of medical issue that I ever have in my life? So I'm saying this as someone who experiences all these sorts of things. Um, but I've had the benefit of being able to really dig deep into what it is that I want for my life. Like my
Hmm.
work is just part of my life. My finances are just part of my life.
Hmm.
I know the life I want to live, and I try to sacrifice that. So it's all secondary to my experience of life, trying to be the best person I can be, continuing to grow and challenge myself, and engaging in things I think really, really matter. But even so, I'm someone who you could even say that's my job is to keep doing that sort of thing. Even so, it weasels in, right? Like we're not
Hmm.
designed to shut out the voices of the collective as if they're not important. And we're wired to be collective creatures. So what we probably need then if we can individually bolster someone, a client, a CEO, a philanthropist, a friend, if we can individually bolster that person for a little while, but then they're just submerged in that stew of vicious messages that no, 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 okay, that sounds fine, but that's for you later once you've banked enough cash.
Yeah.
If we know that that's the dynamic, then we really need to create collective support for a better live.
I really appreciate your answer. I find at times experts like yourself can come out with a book or a piece of information, and whether it's intentional or not, probably a lot of times not intentional, but it comes across they've got it all figured out. But I like how you share in here is that you're still wrestling. You're going to retire. You got to pay for your kids' college. You still have this wrestling dynamic about you never said this exactly, but about money and how it fits in your image or your self identification of meaning in life. And I guess what I'm hearing is the more you've got to understand yourself and view in the collective, perhaps has that helped you buffer against that wrestling match?
Yes and no. I mean, like, it just ended up being so much more expensive to live than I thought. Like, for me, the money thing, I never accepted that. as an important part of my life. I never wanted to do anything for money, but that changed once I had kids, right? Like I was like, oh my
Hmm.
gosh, I now, sure, I can live off of peanut butter and a spoon for days at a time if I need to, but that's not the same for my kids. They're going to need new
Hmm.
clothes. We need to have some way of capturing, the memories. We have to have some safety. We have to have some plans for the future. And so that's really once it became about the stakes of other folks, I guess I went beyond. And I was always someone who would sock away at just a little bit. I never made very much money. Like before I got into being a professor in graduate school, I was a therapist who was earning $12 an hour, right? Like
Hmm.
in Portland, Oregon. And I was still managing to save up for a nice bottle of Pinot Noir every once in a while and put stuff like tiny amounts, but some into an IRA, right? Roth IRA. So I was trying to be responsible, but overall I knew I could just live off of a jar of peanut butter if worst came to worst, and live out of once you take on someone else's interests and you're responsible for that, then yeah, you change a little bit. You can't be so
Hmm.
self-centered, and there's something that is other oriented about trying to save up money to protect someone else's future, right? So
Hmm.
I don't think I've done anything terrible for money, but I've definitely like, I tried to create online courses when COVID hit, and I was like, okay, I'll do that, and like that was miserable, right? I was like, I believe in the courses, but I couldn't make myself market them. It's like I was like I
Yeah.
can't stick with things that aren't meaningful to me, and that's was like, well, I'll just wait until I'll just I'll just wait for my speaking career to come back or something like that. But that's when it became sticky, is because it's a necessity. It's
Hmm.
something that you can't ignore. So the advice I give to my own kids, the advice I give to the kids in my positive psychology courses isn't as pie in the sky as what I believe for myself. Right? Like I just followed my own thing pretty much all the time, to my own detriment quite a lot of the time because I can't, I just learned to never really be able to make myself do things I don't want to do. I start with the best intentions, but I don't
Hmm.
follow through.
Why
So,
do you say to your detriment?
oh, I mean, I could be successful. I could be a successful speaker. I could have started a side business. I could have marketed something or other, but
Yeah.
I recognize that there's value in that, like especially if the message you think you're trying to get out there is really valuable. But I never learned the skill to make myself do things I don't want to do for very long. I can do them for a little while, but to build like an entrepreneurial career, to become a big name speaker, to become a best-selling author, like you got to do things that are hard to do for most people, and they require sustained effort. And to my detriment, I never quite got myself over the hump to do those necessary, difficult things for very long. So that's what I mean. Um, so yeah, so I think that I would say financial responsibility is a really big thing, but financial gain is a stupid thing, right? So if you
Hmm.
can figure out like what does it
Hmm.
take for you to be responsible to yourself, to the people you love, to the people you and causes that you feel some sense of duty towards, yeah, that's important to do.
Hmm.
But just gaining for the sake of having experiences other people tell you are rarefied or is precious, why can't you figure
Hmm.
out what's important to you and then just invest in that?
And maybe that's what you were doing to your non-detriment, investing in things that were
I don't know.
important.
I don't know. I think the more you get to know me, Sean, you'll see like I would much rather read like a detective novel than like market some
Yeah.
product I spent 100 hours developing.
Yeah. You get the joy of doing it, the journey.
Yeah, sure.
But so I we were talking about money, and in money is spending. But you said something in a TED talk that really spoke to me, and you said, spending our moments wisely. And to me, it really just captured myself. I'm got two younger kids, and before I know it, those moments they're going to be adults. Yeah, much of my thinking, especially as a trained financial planner, comes like, how do you spend your money wisely? How do you save it wisely? But the way you framed spending our moments wisely really, really spoke to me. I'm wondering, while there's probably not one individual moment that you came up with that idea, but like what informed that way of thinking? And you said quite a few of those similar comments in your TED Talk.
Yeah, so I think there's a combination of idealism and then just simple regret that informs that perspective. I mean, it is kind of philosophically and practically true that our life is nothing but a string of moments, and that's scary in the big picture. Like our lives, by almost any marker other than other living things, go by so fast that it's like they didn't even happen. The the duration of the most influential of us, other than these billionaires who are gonna like force their way onto the AI internet. I don't know, like we'll be running into Elon Musk when Neuromancer, the great cyberpunk novel of the 1980s comes true. Be like, oh my God, we're still not rid of that lunatic. So, right. So like, yeah, now we've got some sort of immortality, but for the most part, all of us are going to be nothing in a couple hundred years. Like no one will remember us.
Mm-hmm.
That's a scary thought, right? So we can't be trying to I feel like then it's just the existence now that we have. Like we have to really take some responsibility. You know, Viktor Frankl talks about how the present is not very important, the future is not very important. The only thing that's important is the past because it can't be changed. So he
Mm-hmm.
talked about he really kind of talked about saving uh, uh, moments into
Mm-hmm.
the past. Once they're in the bank there, they can't be taken away, right? So if we spend our time wisely, directed towards meaning and purpose and good things instead of pointless, venal, and shallow things, then we fill our past with a life that's rich and good. So there's like a lot of philosophical reasons to think that our moments matter. Then like the simple regret side of things, like I would love to sit here and say like I don't feel regrets about my past decisions or probably decisions I'm going to make in a couple hours when I'm going to eat too many potato chips or something like that, or I'll try to have a lunch. I'm not like I'm not trying to prop up the American peanut industry, but I'm not going to lie. My lunch is going to be peanuts probably at my desk, right? So like, is that smart? Nah. So I've got regrets about how I spend my own moments. I'd like when my kids were young, I was around a lot. When they got a little bit less young, I started traveling to give talks. I was working harder. I was trying to do additional things to bring in extra money to pay for college and all the expensive things that are on a parent's shoulders. Shaped our relationship. I got a great relationship with my kids, but it's different than the relationship that my wife has with them. And it didn't have to be that way if I thought how I'd spent my moments. And then I think
Mm.
back, like all the moments that I spent just like streaming Netflix or, like drinking beer with friends. Did I make the most of those? Could we have had different conversations? Like some of those friends I'm not in touch with that much anymore, right? Like what did I miss that could have kept them close? So at least someone like me, I'm fairly neurotic. I definitely can't turn my brain is always thinking, right? So it's always and it doesn't have any boundaries at all. Like
No.
that's my agreement with my brain is like you can think about anything you want. I can't stop you. I don't want to even try because that just stresses me out. So yeah, it goes down all those paths. Did I spend my moments right? Right? Is there some way for me to think about this myself as a person who makes a lot of mistakes, gets distracted quite a lot, likes a lot of sensory pleasures like potato chips or a glass of wine? Am I doing enough? And do I understand myself well enough to know that if I spend some moments just sitting next to my daughter, which was this morning, I'm drinking coffee, we're talking about the dog, uh, is that enough? Do I have to turn it into like, so how do you see the universe, daughter, or something
Hmm.
like that? Do we have
So,
to put our
what's your
phone?
answer to that? Is that enough? I guess my mind is also going,
Yeah,
is it okay to eat the potato chips once in a while? Is it okay to have that vino and the beer and not be so hard on ourselves? I mean, there's spectrums to this, but
yeah,
yeah. So, how did you answer that question? Is that enough?
yeah. The answer is like balance, right? And you'll not be surprised. The answer for me is reflection and overthinking, right? So I should be keeping track, like So who in the world? I'm sure you've run into this a million times. Like I also know that I'm supposed to rebalance my portfolio and reassess blah, 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 and all these things. And I should be keeping track of which of my investments financially are doing well and which aren't. But I'm really like, if I could get myself to make a selection, I'm done.
Mhm.
So I, that to get the best outcomes for the way that we invest our resources, we have to think about where we want to go and whether our investment strategy is getting us there. I don't want to, I'm not, this is not financial advice. This is also not existential advice, but I think we want to have some time that feels appropriate to us and our capacity and our tolerance of thinking and reflecting. Is it right? Is How many more moments can I have just chilling out versus having deep conversations with people I care about? How many more moments can I have just myself recharging or
Mhm.
having experiences that either I prefer not to share with other folks? Like, I don't want to read out loud. So reading is inherently like selfish thing to do, I guess, even though I think I'm expanding my perspectives on the world, versus moments with other people, right? So I think we just reflect, like, is the balance of how I'm spending my moments
Mm.
creating the life I want right now? Is it creating the past I'm going to look back on with fewer regrets? For me, there will never be no regrets because I often want competing things. And in the future, is it aiming me towards the life that is the life that will we get one life, right? To
Yeah.
make whatever we want to make it. And is the way I'm spending those moments doing that for me or not? And is it doing it? Is it helping other people I care about or even people I don't know do that as well?
I just really appreciate how you've framed this on the moment. It makes it very tangible and approachable, and like, hey, I can focus on this moment. But before we know it, those moments have compounded into 5 years, a decade, 3 decades, etc. You definitely strike me as a guy, and you've said it, who thinks a lot and reflects, and I mean, which is good because you've done such meaningful and impactful work around meaning in life. But you personally, what makes life meaningful for you these days in the everyday moments?
So I think one of the issues there's a song by a Canadian, Bruce Springsteen. No, Bruce Springsteen, Bruce
I
Coburn.
was like,
Scratch that, scratch that,
he's.
scratch that. Rewind. He's one of my
I
favorite
wish
artists,
I'm a
right?
big Springsteen fan,
I know,
but
and that poster in the background, dang it. Okay.
yeah,
So there's actually a song by one of my favorite artists, a Canadian, Bruce Coburn,
yes,
called "The Nature of the Angel Beast." Right? Okay, like many of Bruce's songs, it's overly wordy, so likes exposition, let's say, in some of his songs. But this is the central problem we've always had as a creature, I think, because we are creatures, we're animals. We wouldn't like the taste of sugar if we weren't animals. We wouldn't
hmm
like to oversleep our alarms if we weren't animals, right? But we know we're more than that, and we see a world that's invisible, abstract, complicated, and full of infinite possibilities, both scary and exciting, right? So this is the bounce around that we have, and we're of different natures, right? Like I read a study that there's people who don't even think in words, right? They think in images, and they're just as
wow,
smart as anybody else, but like their natural state is like composition of images, not a long narrative. Like I asked my positive psychology class, just regular Colorado State University students, how many of you think when you're thinking, you're hearing a voice talking in your head? Two-thirds of the class. How many of you are just seeing pictures? Half of the rest of the third. The other half are sleeping, right? But like the idea that we have to think all the time is appealing to someone like me. I do think thinking is actually part of what makes life meaningful for me. But experiencing is super, super important as well. Like we have to find a balance where the the experiential demands of our little creaturely body don't get us in trouble, right? There's a lot of things that our bodies want us to do that probably aren't always advisable. And not I kind of feel like not embracing that side of ourselves sets us up for problems, right? Like not saying like, yeah, I know it's not good for me. It's going to increase my risk for stroke and heart disease and all these other things, but man, I like the taste of red wine. If you try to suppress that, then it's like you hold up, and then it's like you're chugging like
yeah.
you like just have a box of red wine open up your bed, right? You're just pouring it in your
As
mouth.
soon as the kids go to bed.
So it's just because we're like, oh my God, COVID? I can't even tell you how much I started drinking during COVID, right? Like it's just like 2, 3 glasses a day. right? And so that was in part because it tastes good, and I can convince myself. It was also out of a box too, because we didn't have money, so we're just like drinking
Yeah.
like box wine, gobs and gobs of it during COVID. Um, and actually someone I know, I should know better. I had problems with alcohol when I was in college, right? Like I needed to figure that out and find my balance. But it's accepting that we've got multiple natures if we do, and giving healthy space to all of us. So our body is going to tell us when we're pushing too hard. Our body's going to tell us when we need comfort. Our body's going to tell us when we need intimacy. Our body's going to tell us when we need pleasure or stimulation, like some delicious potato chips, right?
Hmm.
Whatever it is, like,
Hmm.
right? Like our body can tell us that it needs things. Our mind uses the data that the body gives us to create our sense of self and our sense of experience. It can do more than that, but it's at least doing that. So I'm not someone who's ever going to advocate lean away from sensory pleasures, sensory experiences. Don't listen to your body, it's the mind over matter sort of stuff. Like, yeah, we can do incredible things with our minds, but everyone has their blend. So I treat meaning in a lot of ways in my life the way I treat just happiness in general. I teach the hedonic model, which is about pleasure and sensation and simple, immediate experiencing of whatever happiness feels like to you. I teach the eudaimonic model, which is purposeful, intentional, long-term focused, usually, or at least ideally, beyond the self focused. And to me at least, and a lot of people I've talked to, the 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 good life, the meaningful life is going to blend a lot of that. So I encourage people to like take time to listen to your body, listen to what makes you feel good. Because a lot of times when we're facing such an uphill battle as a collective species or as an individual creature in this world, we're going to need some short-term TLC. We're going to need some
Hmm.
chocolate. We're going to need some
Yeah.
hugs. We're going to need some special times with friends. We're going to need to just blow off steam in order to give ourselves the boost for the difficult work of digging ourselves out of this.
Thank you. I am seeing the time here, and you've been gracious with your time. Um, you're spending your time with me and the audience, so thank you. I have many, many things I want to follow up with, but I'm going to limit it to my last question here because I'm sure you got things to do. I want to ask you a question that's a hypothetical question for Mike in the future. Let's imagine Mike is at the end of life. Doesn't matter how old you are. Doesn't matter you're 6'6" and longevity can be shorter, but you practice meaning, so it might be longer. But you're at whatever age it is, and you're sitting on front porch, maybe playing some Coburn music, and you decide to pull out a notepad and write a letter to your children's children on what you learned was a key to live a happy, healthy, and I'm going to add meaningful life. What would be in that message?
And so there's a lot of things I'd want to put in there. I think mainly the idea I want to convey is living a meaningful life is serious fun, right? I think that it's gotta, you're gonna encounter a lot of things and you have to take a lot of things seriously, but you should also have a lot of fun. And the serious part in there, I think helps us learn what kind of fun is best for us, what kind of fun detracts from other folks, right? Like I mentioned the idea of humor before, right? Like I think humor is a necessity. I can't be myself if something funny isn't happening, even if it's not me, right? Something funny has to happen. There has to be funniness around for me to be myself, but learning what's funny and what's funny that hurts people and what's funny that brings people together, I think that's serious fun, right? So we try to figure out who we are in the world. We try to figure out how we're impacting other people, how they're impacting us. And we take seriously the job of being a living creature who has lots of short-term needs, but also is going to be around for a long time and can dream. So I wouldn't want anyone to become too overwhelmed by the fact that we can dream our whole lives at any given moment. And I don't want anyone to become too overwhelmed by the idea that constantly we're banking moment after moment, whether we spent it well or not. I just want people to feel engaged in determining their own lives, in taking on whatever they can for the sake of others in the world around them, but that the goal is still a life that you're happy you're living.
Wow, thank you. I mean, living a meaningful life is seriously fun. What a great statement. Engage in determining their own lives. Wonderful, wonderful comments here, Mike. I really appreciated your time. All the work you're doing is fantastic. And thank you for spending your time with me today. For listeners who might want to find out more about your work, the work you love to market, where would you point people to if they were looking for you online?
Well, I'm slowly upgrading my website from the 2004 version that I made as a grad student to something that might be recognizable to folks who haven't seen MySpace in their living memory. So eventually there'll be a michaelfsteger.com website out there. If you search for Michael Steger, you'll probably get an actor, Austrian Ecuadorian actor Michael Steger, who played
I saw that.
a vampire prostitute, and I only wish I was that exciting. I mean, my God, what a great line of work, vampire prostitute. But so
There's a lot of meaning in that.
I mean, my gosh, I literally can't imagine. I literally can't imagine, but I'm intrigued. So so you have to include my middle initial F to find me over this Ecuadorian Austrian actor, who I'm sure is a lovely man. But yeah, or on LinkedIn, that's the only social I've kept. I keep canceling them once the more problematic billionaires buy them up. But yeah, so LinkedIn seems still kind of harmless,
For
so
now,
that's
yeah.
pretty good. So I'm on there. But yeah, I'll have a website soon, and I will say that we started pulling together an event with a couple collaborators, Kiko Kislansky from Salvador, Brazil, and Helena Marujo from Lisbon, Portugal, to launch the first World Meaning and Purpose Summit. And it was small, it was amazing, and one of the pieces of feedback was that we should start a movement. So hopefully in the sustained future, you'll be able to hear about the Meaning and Purpose Summit next year, or the Meaning and Purpose Alliance, and some of the things that we're going to try to offer to folks to try to build an answer to all the stuff I've been complaining about all along. So hopefully that's another place people can find me in the future. But thanks so much for having me, Shaun. I appreciate your questions. We didn't get a chance to contextualize literally everything in terms of the Liverpool Football Club, but you did
I
let me
know.
mention it, and that
Yeah.
feels pretty good and special for me already. So I
And
appreciate your
and
time.
I've been debating bringing it back because we're in the middle of a very difficult playoff run, and I contextualize my hockey team in it. So
Yeah,
anyhow,
well, let me just leave you with a few lyrics from the Liverpool Football Club's
yes.
team song. I mean, it's just like I don't even think the Vikings ever had one. But so this is "Walk On, Walk On with Hope in Your Heart."
Oh, nice. I mean,
Go Oilers!
go Oilers! But what a great way to finish this.
Awesome.
Thank you so much, Mike. I really appreciate it, and I hope we can chat again in the future.
Thanks so much, Shaun.
Thanks for watching this week's episode. If you enjoyed the chat, please like the video and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. We'll see you next time.